Live from the Counterpunch Media Mobile Studios in Grand Blanc, Michigan, it's time for real lives, real families, real fitness. It's time for Derek Noel Fitness.
Hello and welcome to yet another episode of Derek Noel Fitness Live. 2 weeks ago, we had an episode called Top Fitness Trends of 2019. I feel like I had a good time doing that one. So this week we are doing the top nutrition trends of 2019. In case you didn't know, this is episode 31. That episode came out about 2 weeks ago. Last week my producer happened to be on vacation, so we didn't really do too much there. While we are at it, if you could do me a huge favor and give this video a like, a share, throw me a comment, let me know that you're watching. We're going to have a good time with this show today. And just in case you didn't know, over the past few weeks, we have a new addition to the show. We have a live phone line. So you can reach us, which, by the way, this should be popping up right on the screen if you were watching this. You can reach us at 810-412-5999. Feel free to call in. The lines are going to open in about 10 minutes or so. So at about 8:10, since this is the live show, you can call us. Again, that's 810-412-5999. If you have anything you'd like to add to the conversation, feel free, or you can always just call with a question, or if there's something kind of related, feel free to call in. I would love to be able to take that. Otherwise, if you don't really want to be live on the air, because fun fact, your voice will be live on the air, you can also drop a line in the live chat. I have that on the phone. We're going to have a good time with this one today. So, we're going into the top nutrition trends. This is going to be a good one today because, to be completely honest, a lot of my focus over 2019 has been in the nutrition space, learning as much as I can about nutrition, working on certifications, and just growing myself into a nutrition coach as well as a personal trainer and group trainer. So this is near and dear to my heart. There are some things that I feel like were super hyped that really didn't need to be, but then there's also some other things that are really good for the industry. Just like anything, we have those ups and downs, which are going to be really good. So we're going to jump right into this. I actually compiled, because these lists were a little bit more difficult to find than the top fitness trends, because typically things are all lumped into one. This is actually a combination of a couple different lists. You can find one of them by searching Top Nutrition Trends of 2019. Actually, you could find both of them there. We have one from clubindustry.com, which is going to be about the first 5 or 6. And then we have the other ones from the Cary Health and Nutrition Institute, which you can find with a simple Google search. Where are we going to be starting off? Well, I have 11 things on here. Well, really 10 of them plus one kind of joke one that I'd like to get to at the end that we'll probably get to at the end because I like jokes and I like to have a good time. So our first one is personalized nutrition, and I'm going to go one step further and say based on genetics. So at the beginning of the year / at the end of 2018, there really started to be a surge of getting your DNA tested and then seeing what your genetics say for how predisposed you are towards eating. In theory, this sounds awesome because all of a sudden nutrition was going to be unlocked for everyone. You just get a simple blood test. They take your DNA. Actually, it's not even a blood test. It's like the cotton swab thing that you just send, kind of like 23andMe is for your ancestry stuff. And which, by the way, does have some effect on how you process different foods. I can give an example in a second. And then you just ship it off, and it tells you exactly what you need to eat and how to eat to be optimal. The issue here was that while genetics are a factor, it's not the only factor. For example, eating dairy for some people. Should some people avoid dairy? Yeah. If you're lactose intolerant, you probably shouldn't be having dairy unless you have some medication with it that gives the enzyme. But how dairy works typically is your body doesn't have the enzyme required to break down lactose, which is why people are lactose intolerant. They literally don't have the enzyme. People who have not, whose ancestors have not passed that enzyme down in their DNA based on things like, have we been working with livestock for generations? So people from Europe, where things have been domesticated, like cattle and drinking cow's milk and things like that, they typically all have that enzyme, whereas other populations, such as Native American populations that have not traditionally domesticated and had livestock in the past for generations and generations. Obviously they do now, but back in the day, they didn't have ready access to that. So they never had a chance to gain that enzyme, which is why lactose intolerance in Native Americans is a lot more prevalent than it is in Caucasians. Again, depending on where Caucasians are from, because that's painting a really broad brush. But that's an example of where genetics can come into play, is whether or not that enzyme is there. And fun fact, you can also lose the enzyme as time goes on, especially if you're not having dairy. Your body doesn't feel the need. It's kind of a, if you use it, you lose it kind of scenario. And that's where you can come back and shoot yourself in the foot, because your genetics might say you can have dairy, but then your stomach doesn't. Which actually brings us to number 2, which is the microbiome and gut health. Well, actually, I guess I should add that hopefully for that personalized nutrition based on genetics, that some more studies are done so that actually can be accurate. Because right now the studies are actually kind of weak, and really that's what the nutrition industry does, is they find some weak study or something that might take place in rats, and then they extrapolate that to go, oh, humans, here, this is going to work really well for you. These supplements work really well for people like this, when the studies don't really actually say that. So make sure you're just doing your due diligence. Again, I love this website because it can help you with a lot of things. If you go to examine.com and you type in different supplements or anything like that, it'll give you the rundown of what studies actually say. They compile hundreds, sometimes hundreds of studies, and give you what the studies tend to find out. Because if you base anything off of one study, you're not getting the complete picture. So if there's only one study on something, maybe you should kind of hold off on judgment until there are more things going on with that. Anyways, number 2 is the microbiome and gut health. Gut health honestly exploded in 2019. It's insane how big gut health and the gut microbiome have been. This is another one where, as much as people are pushing it, there really isn't a ton of science to actually back it yet. But you do want to make sure that your stomach is taken care of. So a good probiotic is going to be able to help you out. The issue with probiotics and prebiotics is you have to keep taking them because it doesn't just magically fix itself over time. You need to do that. You can't just do a one and done, like I'm taking a prebiotic one time. You have to consistently add to it to keep that up, because there's usually a reason that your gut microbiome or gut health isn't right where it should be, and it's usually a dietary reason. So trying to figure out what's going on dietarily, if that's even a word, is going to be a really good indicator of what's going on there. Because just like anything, you don't really want to have to rely on anything for the rest of your life, if you can. So again, gut health, super big. It can really help people lose some weight, especially if you realize that your bloating is caused by some imbalance in a bacteria or something like that. So prebiotics, probiotics are good. Just make sure that you're looking for the right ones, because there are, again, the nutrition industry jumped on this and they're going, oh, hey, there is this many billion cultures in this thing, but if they're not the right cultures for what you need, what's the point of taking it? So keep an eye out for that. Make sure you're doing your due diligence on which ones you should take. I'm not going to get into it right now, but let's go ahead and move on from that one. Number 3 is protein. And I have another one later on in the list, which is plant-based. So we'll talk about plant-based proteins versus meat proteins, or animal protein, I should say. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But basically, more and more studies are coming out because a few years ago there were some studies that came out that said if you're eating a lot of protein, it can impact your kidney health. And people took that and ran with it as an excuse to not eat protein. So they've been doing a lot more studies, and they're finding out that if you're eating things like 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight that you are, that's actually an optimal protein number, and your kidneys won't have any trouble keeping up. Where it starts to become an issue is if you're eating over like 400 or 450 grams of protein a day consistently. That's where the level of proteins and amino acids can really start to mess with your kidneys, and we can avoid that. That being said, that is so much meat. It is ridiculous how much protein that actually is when you break it down. It's the equivalent of eating more than 5 pounds of chicken a day. That's a lot of meat. Actually, 5 pounds of chicken a day would still not be enough. That's only about half of that number. So again, that comes into play with things like the carnivore diet, which was actually on some of these lists, but it's really not it. I have only ever heard of one person following the carnivore diet. And we'll talk about that a little bit more, not specifically that one, but diets in general, because a few of them are actually on here. But yeah, if you're looking at protein intake numbers, don't worry about it impacting your kidneys. Honestly, if you're trying to lose weight, you should be eating a little more protein because it's going to help you maintain your muscle mass. It really does play a large role in muscle maintenance. So make sure that you're sticking with proteins. If you are trying to cut fat, your protein number should actually be higher than if you're trying to gain muscle. That's a fun fact, and again, I can nerd out about this stuff. I spent a lot of time in 2019 researching this stuff, but we're going to move on from that. So just make sure you're getting enough protein, 0.8 to 1 gram per pound of body weight. If you are on the overweight side, make it your goal body weight. So for example, someone who weighs 300 pounds probably shouldn't need, actually I can guarantee you doesn't need 300 grams of protein. But sticking for like 150 to 180, maybe even 200, depending on where your goals are, that's going to be where you want to start that baseline number at. And from that number, you can figure out everything else about your diet too. And again, we'll get into that in a couple minutes. I'm still on clubindustry.com's list. Remember, if you have anything to add, let's just keep moving. Number 4 of the top nutrition trends of 2019 is intermittent fasting. This honestly started to gain popularity in 2017. That's when I started to notice that it was becoming a trend. I really feel like it peaked in 2018, so it peaked last year, and it's still around now. People are still doing it, and people are seeing success with it. But it's kind of taken a back seat to number 5, which is going to be keto, which we'll talk about that in a minute. But intermittent fasting, in case you don't know how intermittent fasting works, you have a window during the day of which you eat. And for a lot of people, it's 8 hours. So for a lot of people, they'll eat their first meal at noon, and then they're not allowed to eat after 8 p.m. And intermittent fasting and fasting zealots will say that it really improves your cognitive ability, and the fast is great for you. And it'll solve all of your health issues and things like that. And when it comes to intermittent fasting, that's really not true. Studies are showing that the only time that fasting can have a positive impact on your health or biomarkers or anything like that is if you're having a fast for over 24 hours, which a lot of people don't do, nor are they willing to because it's really hungry, and for a lot of people, there's no reason to. So just keep that in mind whenever we're doing this. The way intermittent fasting actually works is by having a 8-hour designated window, or for some people it's been 10. I have, by the way, full disclosure, I have followed intermittent fasting before simply because it was working with my schedule really well, and I saw some success, but this is how it works. You have an 8-hour window of which to eat food. If you try and shove all of your calories into 8 hours, you're going to be full. And then if you stick with it and you don't allow yourself to eat after 8 p.m. and you don't allow yourself to eat until noon the next day, then you are keeping yourself typically in a calorie deficit, which is how people typically lose weight with these things. So again, it's just a way to restrict the amount of calories you're getting in, which means you're going to be losing weight. Because when it comes to losing weight, calories in versus calories out is king. And we'll be talking about that in a little bit too. Number 5, we have keto. So keto, over the past year and a half, 2 years, has blown up. With everybody basically trying to say the carbs are the devil. By the way, carbs were the devil like 20 years ago. Then all of a sudden fats were the devil like 10 years ago. Now carbs are back to being the devil. There's some trends here when it comes to fad diets, because keto is, well, number 1, keto is a medical diet that is good for people who have epilepsy, which is why it was originally developed. And then they actually found that keto does have some positive uses for people with diabetes. But again, it has the positive uses there. When it comes to keto, how it works for most people is all of a sudden you're not eating carbohydrates, which means you're cutting out a ton of junk foods, because a ton of junk foods have carbs in it, which means you're only getting your macronutrients, so you're getting your protein and your fats, because again, you're not eating carbohydrates, and you're not touching carbs. You have to eat a lot, and by the way, in order to be in ketosis, you only have to be eating medium protein, so you're eating lower, slightly lower than probably optimal protein numbers, and you're eating a lot of fat. And that's because if you eat too much protein and fat, your body's actually going to be using some of that protein for fuel, which means you're not using fats, which means the ketone levels in your bodies aren't actually hitting those numbers, and you're not actually in ketosis. I think it's like 8 millimolars, or a lot of people who are eating this way, they don't track anything. You can actually get to a dangerous point of ketones in your blood as well. So just make sure, and I guess I should say full disclosure, before you start any diet, you should talk to your doctor to make sure it's something safe for you. That being said, make sure you have a doctor that is kind of forward-thinking and not one that's going to throw a low-cholesterol diet at you when you already have low cholesterol. That's actually something that happened to me. That's a whole other story. So again, keto, you're cutting out an entire macronutrient profile, which means you're not eating any carbohydrates, which means you're probably going to end up in a calorie deficit. There are also people who have not lost any weight on keto because they go way overboard and they're eating so many fats that they're in a calorie surplus. And again, you're not going to lose weight if you are in a calorie surplus. Because again, calories in versus calories out, that calorie deficit is king for weight loss. Notice I'm saying weight loss and not fat loss, by the way. There is a difference. Before I go on to the list, we've got through 5. We are going to take a quick break.
You're listening to Derek Noel Fitness here on IPMNation.com/counterpunch. He'll bring the smarts. Now the sweat, well, that's up to you.
And we are back. So I believe that is because honestly in my show notes I didn't specify exactly where these two lists were from, so they're intermingled a little bit. The first 5 at least were from clubindustry.com with their top 5. Already kind of broken it down. I do see keto kind of staying around for a while. Intermittent fasting is always going to be there. Again, I have done intermittent fasting. I know that there weren't any extra health benefits. It just worked better for my schedule, and I could do it for a while. So if you can sustain it, you might as well keep doing it, because that's the big thing. That's another downfall of keto, is a lot of people can't sustain ketosis for a while because all of a sudden they're depriving themselves of something, so all of a sudden they want it more, and then they end up binging, and oh, there you go. Because, fun fact, over 80% of the people who lose weight regain that weight and then some within 2 years, because they do things that aren't sustainable, and then they just yo-yo diet back and forth, which is really bad. But it is honestly, it's more of a mental thing, and mindset's a whole other episode, which I would love to actually do. Number 6 for nutrition trends, CBD-related products. This has even been in the last 6 months. CBD products have exploded, especially with marijuana becoming legal in some places and CBD oil being legal, because in some states I believe it is still not legal. Michigan is a place where it is. And there are a lot of things being done with CBD oil. A lot of people use it as a sleep aid. They have CBD creams, which helps relieve sore joints and things like that. So there are a ton of different uses for CBD. I honestly haven't done any research one way or another. I personally don't use them. Not that I'm worried about failing drug tests or anything like that, because in a lot of cases, there are, let's break this down real quick. You have THC, which is the stuff that gets you high when you're smoking weed. And then you have CBD, which is the oil, which kind of helps with the relaxation stuff. And that's generalizing, and I'm sure the science is at least a little bit wrong in what I just said, but I mean, there is a significant difference there. Just because there is CBD in something does not mean there is THC in something, and vice versa, by the way. So keep that in mind whenever you're looking at CBD products before you write them off as just being another way for people to get high, because that is definitely not the case. There are a lot of pain relief and other uses for it. That being said, because I kind of blew up the first 5, I am going to say that I do see a lot of positive coming from CBD-related products in 2020. I really think that it's only going to get bigger. CBD is becoming a Goliath in the nutrition industry, and really with all of the benefits that people proclaim to have, because again, I'm not a scientist, I just read studies from scientists and help to relay that information. I really do think it's going to be here to stay, and I really think that there's a lot of good that can be coming from it. We're going to move on to number 7 now, which is authenticity, and I put in parentheses transparency in terms of what I'm talking about. Back, I want to say like 5 or 6 years ago, there were a lot of supplement companies that were getting in trouble for doing something called amino spiking with their protein powders. And I'm using this as an example. I'm not going to go super deep into it, but basically what that means is they were taking a protein number, so they were putting a certain number of proteins. So let's say, for the sake of this, protein powder proclaims to have 25 grams of protein in it. A couple of the ones at Walmart were actually busted for this that you could buy for super cheap, and they did this because it made their product cheaper for them to make. So they have 25 grams of protein, and what they found out from testing, and by they I mean the people who did these third-party things, because supplements aren't regulated by the FDA. If you thought that they were, you're sorely mistaken. It is something that would be nice, but they are actually not regulated by the FDA, things like protein powders and stuff like that. But what these companies were doing was they would have a proprietary blend, which means they don't have to tell you exactly what is in, exactly what amounts of things are in there, and they would say 25 grams of protein. Well, they would put 17 or 18 grams of protein in, and then they would make up the other, what is that, we'll say 7 grams with amino acids, so incomplete proteins. They would just throw it in, but because they're a building block of protein, they counted it as protein and said you were getting 25 grams. This led to a giant blow up of a few different companies, and again, I'm not going to name any names, but after that, proprietary blends have been really looked down upon by a lot of different companies. People are wanting full transparency on everything that is in everything, excuse me. So you'll see a lot more breakdowns of what is actually there. That being said, I have run into a few different proprietary blends, and I look at it, and then I see if I can find the actual breakdown online, because sometimes they do that. They'll post a proprietary blend, say that 5 times fast, on the nutrition label, and then if you go on their website, they actually give you a breakdown. Or you'll just find right on the label, they literally break down everything by how many milligrams or grams and things like that. I am going to say just because they put that on there doesn't, again, it's not regulated by the FDA, so you always have to be a little skeptical. But you can always go on, and you still want to make sure that it's around the recommended values. Actually, now that I'm talking about recommended values or recommended daily allowances, I'm going to digress for a second and go back to protein intake numbers because I've heard this, and not to throw them under the bus, but I've heard this more from vegetarians than anyone else, that, well, the daily allowance for protein is only 50 to 60 grams per day. The recommended daily allowances are the minimum values you need to avoid getting sick or becoming ill or developing some deficiencies. That is what the recommended daily allowances are for. It's not recommended that you get these numbers. 50 to 60 grams of protein, along with the protein intake numbers, have found that that is less than half of what the average person needs to thrive in a day. So make sure you're getting those protein numbers up if they are consistently low. From working with general population, I can tell you a lot of people are really low in their protein numbers. And if you need to supplement with a protein shake, just make sure, going back to this transparency, that you have a good quality brand. Your local trainer, or honestly the Google machine and Amazon reviews and things like that, are a really good place to look to see what people are saying. Or you can go online and just do some research yourself. It is really a good thing to do. We're going into number 8 now, which is sugar. Sugar is apparently the devil incarnate, and it is the worst thing, and it causes cancer, and you're going to die if you eat sugar. I'm sure everybody has heard one of those things in honestly like the past 5 to 10 years. Or sugar is the equivalent of cocaine. That would be one heck of a time for a lot of people. Simply put, it's not like that. Sugar is just a basic carbohydrate, and carbohydrates are not the devil. In fact, a lot of people who are exercising regularly require some sort of sugar. By the way, let's break it down. Your muscles store something called glycogen. Unless you're on keto, then you don't have any glycogen. That's why you lose the 5 to 10 pounds, because you actually store water weight when you have carbs in your system. Again, besides the point, your muscles have glycogen. It is basically a stored form of sugar. It is the energy unit that your body uses to create more energy. It's called ATP. I did an entire episode breaking down how these work in the different things. You can go back, I think it was like somewhere between episodes 10 and 15. I'm sure I can go through, or someone can go through and find it and post the link to that. You can also find them with names on the YouTube channel, which, by the way, Counterpunch Media on YouTube. If you could go on there and give it a subscribe, that would be awesome. There's my plug. Back to sugar. But a lot of people demonize sugar and they say no added sugars or no sugars or anything like that, or sugar is addictive. I'm going to counter that by saying you don't see people saying they are addicted to fruit. The sugar in fruit is still sugar. I'm going to say that one more time for the people watching in the back or kind of only half paying attention. The sugar in fruit is still sugar, and you don't hear people saying that they are addicted to fruit. People just really like the sweet flavor, the sweet taste, because guess what? Your body likes carbohydrates a lot. It's not that you're addicted to it, it's that your body craves it because that's what it needs to fuel itself. That being said, if you're eating only carbs and only carbs, even those complex carbs like rice or like white and brown rice, by the way, no difference. Eat the white rice if you hate brown rice. Eat the brown rice if you hate white rice. Just it's personal preference. That stuff, those carbohydrates all get broken down into, guess what? Sugars. Those veggies that you eat that have 4 grams of carbohydrates, those get broken down into sugar. Tomatoes have sugar. Like all the vegetables that you're eating still have a small amount in there, because guess what? That's how plants also work, because they're also a living organism. So when I hear people just saying that they're going 0 sugar, have fun with that. I'm going to go ahead and enjoy my lattes because I know that sugar isn't the devil. And in fact, for most sports nutrition, they say that 20% of your daily calories in a day can come from sugar with no negative consequences. So make sure you are keeping track of that, because you still don't want to go super overboard on it because diabetes, or especially if you're diabetic, you need to really pay attention to sugar. But if you're looking at things like the glycemic index or things like that, glycemic index works when you are eating carbohydrates in isolation. In most cases, people are eating them with fats or with proteins, which means that they kind of balance out and the glycemic index can be thrown out the window. That's my sugar tirade. I'm going to move on. Number 9 is plant-based diets. I'm not saying specifically like vegan, even though veganism is a thing, and if you don't want to eat animals because you love animals and you feel like it's cruel, go ahead. Just don't push your values on me, please, which I feel like is how a lot of people are. That being said, people saying that about vegans, really, the everyday vegan that you run into, I know a few of them, they don't push their values on anyone else. It's just how they prefer to eat. And if that's how you prefer to eat, just do that. Don't get on people for eating that way. Don't get on people for not eating that way. Just let people do their own thing when it comes to their nutrition stuff or when it comes to their eating style. But having a plant-based diet is actually pretty good. Honestly, eating a plant-based diet is probably one of the best things you can do, simply because you are getting most of the micronutrients you need in a day. And if you're wondering what micronutrients are versus macronutrients are the protein. Technically, it's protein, carbohydrates, fats, and alcohol. And then your micronutrients are your things like your vitamins and your minerals and things like that. So when you're eating a plant-based diet, chances are a lot higher that you're getting all of the micronutrients that you need and you can stay balanced. That's really good. That means that you don't have to worry about supplementing with other vitamins. For example, one of the drawbacks of being a vegan is a lot of them have to supplement with vitamin D because they are vitamin D deficient. Again, a lot of humans actually are vitamin D deficient. And it's actually one of the two supplements that I recommend that everyone does take to stay up on things. So plant-based dieting is honestly a really good thing. I think it's going to become more of a thing, especially with this whole food-based thing. And again, it's cleaner carbohydrates. So eating something like a sweet potato, there are a lot more micronutrients in it than there is in a cup of sugar. For example, I was struggling to think of something, but sweet potatoes still have sugar in them. That's what makes them sweet, but they also have a bunch of vitamins and minerals which also help you. That's why we always say to choose complete carbohydrates and move through that. Number 10, honestly, I have no idea where I'm at time, so I'm just talking at this point. Number 10 is intuitive eating. This is another choice for a diet kind of move. I shouldn't say it's a diet because the entire point of intuitive eating is that you shouldn't need to follow a diet. It's that you teach yourself to eat in moderation, and you are intuitively eating, so you are not eating when you're feeling full or when you're not hungry, and then you eat slowly, take like 15 minutes to chew and digest your food, and all of these things. All of these good habits are actually based off of intuitive eating, and a lot of people can get some benefit out of that. I do think that it's going to become more of a thing as people start to eat more whole foods and less processed foods. But again, you also have to look at where people are growing up, what kind of system they're in, how they grew up, how their parents grew up, what kinds of food they're eating. Basically, their entire background is going to determine whether they are successful with intuitive eating. Because if they've never paid attention to how they feel while they're eating, the chances of them being successful aren't nearly as high as someone who's fully in tune, someone who's been watching what they're eating their entire life, someone who is not given sugar as a kid, and things like that. So, intuitive eating definitely going to be here to stay, and we're moving through. Number 11 is kind of the joke, but not a joke one. I just wanted to end it off on kind of a hilarious note for myself, because I laugh literally every time I hear of people talking about the health benefits of this, because it is ridiculous and just not true, is celery juice. Celery juice exploded and came out of nowhere in 2019, and people were claiming that it was curing cancer and that it was making them feel amazing, which it might, because again, micronutrients in celery, and all of these other things. I'm here to tell you, celery juice, just eat regular celery and you will get the same exact benefits. If you hate celery, eat something else. But in fact, celery juice is worse for you than actually eating celery itself, because you're not getting the fiber, and a lot of people still need that fiber in there. Plus, I feel like celery juice would probably be almost as bad as just eating a pure spinach, like blended spinach or something like that. I really don't think it would be good. I'm not going to do that because, again, it's kind of ridiculous that you think that you need to drink a celery juice bottle. And that being said, if you just like how it tastes and that's what you want to drink, by all means, go ahead and do it. I'm not pushing my values on it. I just want you to know that it is a fact, and I'm talking a real fact here, not something that is made up by some big pharma or like big food is what I've heard before. It doesn't do anything for your body. It doesn't help alkalize your body. By the way, your body is, when you alkalize your body, you're not actually alkalizing it, because that's not how your body works. It stays within its homeostasis point because it doesn't like that change. If you become too acidic, bad things happen. If you become too alkaline, bad things also happen, so it needs to stay balanced. And I'm not actually going to go into what I just thought of, but please, if you drink celery juice, just know that it's not actually doing anything good for you. It's not doing anything bad, but it's not doing anything good. You're literally just drinking it because you like the taste. And I would rather drink something that either one has slightly fewer calories in it, because people add things, or water, because guess what? Celery juice is water. That's all it is. It's green water. So on that note, I didn't get any phone calls. Make sure next week you keep that phone number down. It is 810-412-5999. This has been a nice list of the top nutrition trends of 2019. If you would like to find these lists, again, you can go to clubindustry.com or the Cary Health and Nutrition Institute. And I threw celery juice in there just for fun because it was a thing, and I laugh about it every time I hear about it. You can find me on Instagram at the Derek Noel, on Facebook, where this is currently streaming live, at facebook.com/the Derek Noel. If you could give me a like and a share, I would love that. I appreciate you. Thank you for just tuning in. You can also find us over on the YouTube if you would like to give us a subscribe. If you search for Counterpunch Media in YouTube, that'll pop right up. This has been episode 31 of Derek Noel Fitness Live. Have a great night, everybody.